Buenas tardes. I'm Antonio Tijerino with the Hispanic Heritage Foundation, and welcome to another virtual community charla. Charlas are weekly virtual interactions led by our community to present, discuss, and share personal experiences, ideas, actions, and projects through a series of compelling and inspiring presentations, often based on a theme, like today. Today's charla is in partnership with AARP as we continue to celebrate Pride. Yes, we're making the most of the month because we had a celebration earlier this month, but as we all know, Pride is year-round, as well as Hispanic heritage. We're proud not only to celebrate Pride, but to provide a unique platform to discuss the perspective of elder Latinx LGBTQ plus experiences, perspectives, and ideas through the film Acuitzeramo. The film explores a valued segment of our community that is often overlooked, GLBTQ plus Latinx elders. In many areas of society, it seems like our elders, especially our queer elders, are pushed aside and forgotten. We want to help tell this story in hopes of reviving respect for this segment of our community and remind us that it is precisely at this time of their lives that they need the most compassion and love, especially during this time of COVID and social unrest and just the daily challenges that we all face. The film has been presented at the San Diego Film Festival, Moriela International Film Festival, and Sedona International Film Festival, among many others. After the short film, we'll have a discussion with director Miguel Ángel Caballero and producer actor Luis Aldana, as well as actor Sal Lopez. Our good friend and three-time charla orador, Nii-Quartelai from AARP, will be leading the discussion. I just want to take a moment to just give a big thank you to our fantastic partner, friend, and a real leader in our community, Yvette Peña from AARP. Please join us after the film, in case we have enough time, for questions and answers with the cast. The one disclaimer before we start, we ask that you please not record any parts of this charla. Again, being respectful of the film that we're about to show you, which is a unique opportunity. It is now my privilege to present the film, Acuitzeramo, in partnership with AARP.
Ya falleció Roberto.
Hello, 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 and happy Pride, everyone. I'm just looking at the chat box. You all are beginning to light up the chat box with your thoughts on that film. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai Quartey. I serve as Senior Advisor and National LGBTQ Liaison at AARP. We are thrilled to be partnering with the Hispanic Heritage Foundation and the distinguished panel that I'm preparing to introduce here. How great is it that we get to, in Pride Month, but not in Pride, because at Hispanic Heritage Foundation and at AARP, we celebrate Pride 365 days of the year. And so it is great to wrap up this month with such an important film, a great film. I had the opportunity to see it for the first time at the Outfest Fusion Film Festival in Los Angeles in March. It was one of my last in-person events this year, and it was so memorable. And I'm just so glad that we get to share it with all of you here today. I want to introduce the panel. But before I introduce the panel, I just want to say, again, a big thank you to the Hispanic Heritage Foundation team for organizing this charla. I want to also thank my colleagues at AARP, Yvette Pena, who leads our Hispanic Latino national audience strategy, as well as Veronica Segovia Badon, and the entire team that pulled this together. This is fantastic. And so let me first start off by introducing the filmmaker, Miguel Angel Caballero. Welcome, Miguel.
Thank you, Nii-Quartelai. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And he doubles as both the executive producer of the film and one of the stars of the film. Luis Aldana is with us. Welcome, Luis.
Thank you so much, Nii-Quartelai. Happy to be here, and thank you, AARP and the Hispanic Foundation, please. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. And you might recognize his face, not just on the movie poster art, but another one of the stars of the film, Salvador Lopez. Sal Lopez is with us. Welcome.
Thank you, Nii-Quartelai. Pleasure to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So let's go ahead and jump in. Miguel, I want to start with you. Can you share a little bit about who or what was the inspiration to create this film? It really touches on an experience that we don't always have an opportunity to see. The experience of LGBT older adults in Mexico, who suffer the loss of their loved ones, their spouses, their partners, and aren't always in communities that are as welcoming or as affirming to them, and sometimes feel the need to go back into the closet to grieve, let alone to continue to live their life. And so tell us a little bit about the inspiration for this film.
Yes, so I actually grew up in the actual town of Acuitzeramo, and that is in the state of Michoacan. I would say, to just put it in location, it's between Guadalajara and Mexico City, let's say. And I grew up in that town. I traveled back and forth from Mexico and the US with my parents. My parents were farm workers, so I grew up 6 months in the US, 6 months in Mexico, and went to school in both countries. And I remember, growing up in that town, as I kind of approached my teenage years, there was always, single men or single females that just never married. And when I would ask my mom, why have they not married? She would always say, well, they just never found anybody. They never found anybody. And that was, the story that everybody in that town would tell themselves. They're single because they never found anyone. And as I got older, I started reflecting and looking back. And as I started to embrace myself as a gay man as well, I started looking back into my years growing up there. And I thought, did they really not find anybody? Or was there not a platform, or they couldn't just love the person that they really wanted to love? Because in these small towns, a lot of times it's not even homophobia, but it's just there is no dialogue about this, about being gay at an older age. There's nothing that kind of supports older folks that are gay in smaller towns. And again, sometimes it is homophobia and it is, Catholicism, but sometimes there's just no examples and they have no idea how to support somebody. So that's where the story started. And, it kind of went around. Initially, it was actually set in the US, in a small town in the US. And then there was a competition at the Morelia International Film Festival for small shorts. And I told Luis, I'm going to set it in my hometown of Acuitzeramo. And, so we could submit to Morelia. And we did that. And it just took on a completely different meaning. And Luis said, we have to shoot it there. There's no coming back and setting it in the US, because that's a conversation that nobody's having about rural Mexican towns and elderly gay men in these towns. Oh, I think, Did Nii-Quartelai freeze?
I think you might have.
I think so. Oh,
There he
we're
is.
back.
There you go. Okay. I wasn't sure if it was you or if it was me. But that's all right. That's all right. I wanna move on to Luis. And
Sure.
you know, first of all, you were amazing in the film.
Thank you.
And you know, we thought that I don't know how many folks thought this. Let us know in the chat box. But you know, you think that the story's going to go a particular way, and then towards the end, there's a little bit of a plot twist. Some might
Right.
say a lot of bit of a plot twist. Machismo culture. I want you to talk a little bit about machismo culture and its prevalence in Latin America, and the ways in which you think that this film may shatter that image, or at least begin to break apart that the machismo culture that exists. Because at first, you know, we thought that your character, you know, was a demonstration of that, an example of that machismo culture, until
Right.
we got to the end of the film. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, I mean, you know, as a Mexican, Latinx, queer man, you know, I'm hyper aware of that reality I think in prevalent society, but also very much in our community. You know, the notion of toxic masculinity and how that's linked to machismo, and how that then is also linked to homophobia. You know, so it's all these things that I think Miguel was trying to start a dialogue about. You know, and for us, you know, like he explained just now, when we landed in Acuitzeramo and started during our location scouting, we knew that we were going to be facing these sort of discussions and facing these ideas head on. You know, the notion of machismo in especially a small rural town like in Acuitzeramo and in a bunch of different rural towns that this sort of represents, you know. And I think, you know, to answer your question, I mean, I think it's prevalent, it's present. I think we've made a few steps forward. We've made some headway, but I think it's these types of stories. I think it's these types of films that will continue to inspire that sort of dialogue. You know, a wound, you know, which I consider machismo, I considered homophobia, transphobia, all these things I consider wounds. And unless we take the time to clear out those wounds, bandage them properly, and sort of start the healing process, you know, I think we're going to continue to see them. But I think this is a step in the right direction to open up a dialogue. You know, I think it's an important beginning step.
That's great. That's great. That's great. And Sal, I want to bring Sal into the film. You know, Sal Lopez, Salvador. You were amazing in the film. You were amazing in the film, and you really brought so much heart. You brought so much heart to the film, and you know, you made you know, folks that too often feel invisible, you made them more visible. In your research for the film, did you find ways to help or to be present for older Latino gay folks? You know, talk to us a little bit about some of the research that you did in order to show up the way that you did on film.
I'm so sorry, Nii-Quartelai. I missed a part of your question because you froze.
No worries. I'm sorry. I'll say that again. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the research that you did preparing for the film? Because you showed up with so much heart, and you know, the audience was really able to connect with you, to empathize with you. We walked away feeling a great deal of compassion for you. So you can talk. Can you talk a little bit about the research that you did in preparation for the role?
Well, you know, obviously, I used to dance when I was young, when I was younger, and so I have the gay community I've been very close to the gay community in my life, and so much so that you know, I was the best man at one of our dearest friends who's gay, etc. But I was very conscientious about bringing not just the humanity, but also a grace to the character, because when Luis you know, shared the script with me, I thought that what he was putting his finger on was this community was a revelation, really, because I thought, wow, we've never seen this movie, we've never seen this story. It was so you know, it was a wonderful. It was really an opportunity to shine the light on this particular segment, and that is that normally you don't see, that you're not familiar with, that you wonder, you know. And I was just so excited to be part of that. But to further answer your question, one of the main things actually that I was so conscientious and concerned about, because I wanted to be accurate. My first language is Spanish, and I knew that it was going to be in Spanish, and we're supposed to depict these people, or I'm supposed to be from this town. So we went over the script and made sure that it flowed. You know, that the language, the colloquialism was accurate enough that we were going to be authentic, and also so that was one of the main things that I was very concerned about, to bring that authenticity. And you know, my dad was from a small town like that, much smaller town actually from there, which I got to visit many years ago. And so I've seen these people. To me, characters like myself, I've seen them in this situation. I've seen how they carry themselves, how there's an earthiness to them, how they're, and also the other challenge was that when Miguel asked me, he said, actually, this character is supposed to be in his 70s. I know you're not in your 70s. So I thought, okay, so I'm going to have to carry myself a little differently. And so anyway, that was, I felt a great responsibility. And I knew that I had to bring a genuine humanness to the character. And so that's what we tried to convey. And working with Luis and Miguel, you know, we rehearsed, and we worked the script together. We sat down and really tried to get to the crux of it, and also to convey it, you know. And I mean, I just seeing it again right now when I saw it, you know, on the computer. Man, I was moved. Robert, who did the music, it was so beautiful, and cinematography. So all those things, all those elements really contributed to the vision that Miguel had.
So Salvador, I'm going to ask you, and then I'm going to ask Luis, what do you think life for Salvador in the film? Because we're talking to the real life Salvador Lopez, but he played Salvador, you know, in case folks didn't catch that. What do you think life for Salvador in the film? What do you think his life was like after Roberto died and his son left?
Well, I guess. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No,
please.
I spoke a lot.
Well, I would say this, and I would tap it off, probably pass this on to Miguel a little bit, but there actually is, the story sort of continues with this film, you know, and again, Miguel can speak more about this, but the idea in terms of the narrative that's been created, that Miguel has created in this world, and and no spoilers, because there really isn't any sort of a continued sort of series in terms of this specific story. But the notion that Miguel and I had talked about, you know, what would happen if, you know, let's say, you know, Anthony and Sam head to the airport for some reason they can't leave, and they're forced to come back and stay with Salvador, and the notion of actually Anthony taking Salvador with him to the United States and sort of recreating or establishing a relationship that he was never really able to have with his father. And I'll stop there. I don't know if Miguel, I don't know if I've spoken too much, or if you want to add on to that, but
yeah,
this is the discussion that Miguel and I had, you know, post this film.
I mean, upon creating these two characters, what I really wanted to do is sort of just have them on opposite ends, even though they're both, one's Mexican, they're both Latinx, you'd consider. And I wanted to, by the end of the short, really bridge a cultural, an age gap and generational gap, that these characters are in completely different worlds, but they come together and they mourn the loss of a loved one that they have. And, you know, one of the things that I was really conscious in not doing is, you know, ending this film in a very dark way, that it's like, oh, this poor guy in this town. I mean, it even goes back to the cinematography of it. When I, you know, had meetings with Philip, who's our cinematographer, I told him, this is a man that lives on the verge of poverty pretty much in the US, but I do not want to depict them in this very gritty, kind of shaky way. I want to celebrate the beauty of his life, and I don't want him to be gritty. I want this to look beautiful. And on top of that, I felt like the ending, it can't just end with he loses his partner and that's it. And it goes back to the title. The title, Acuitzeramo, it's part indigenous name of the Purépechas in Michoacán. And what it means is the serpent will be king. And the serpent is actually, in the spiritual context, is sort of a rebirth, or a new world sort of rebirthing. So I kept the title because I feel that Salvador, the character, in the end, what he starts doing is he starts transforming the town just for being himself. So you have this the epitome of a macho on a horse, you know, the very manly man that goes by Salvador and says, keep your spirits up. And I think that's the beginning where the whole town is starting to have a dialogue and is starting to change, and, you know, morphing into a more accepting, empathetic town, in my mind, of the film.
And speaking of the town, did the town know that?
I just want to add one.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to add that what Miguel said was the impetus for me to sing at the end. I'm humming to myself.
That's right.
And it's because I wanted to convey that there's an optimism at the end. It's not grim, you know. There's an optimistic you know, touch at the end. Go ahead. Sorry.
Absolutely.
No, that's great. That's great. You know, so I was just going to ask, speaking of the town, a movie about a gay couple, and you know, what was their reaction, if there was any reaction at all?
So to be honest, initially I knew that because it was my town and everybody in Acuitzeramo knows who I am, I knew it was definitely a safe space. And even though this dialogue is not had, I knew that they were going to eventually be okay with. But honestly, you know, outside of the surrounding towns of Michoacán, they you know, they don't know who we are. And I really, because it's a very prevalent way of life in terms of homophobia, I didn't want to really announce to the supporting towns, especially because I had my cast there, I had crew there, I have everybody there. And it all takes, you know, somebody who unfortunately does not agree with that, and you hear that you're filming a gay film, and from another town that they don't know who I am or who we are, they come in and, you know, they might, you know, create something that is not necessary in the production. And I felt like to a certain extent, I'd be putting, you know, my cast and crew in a sort of danger, you know, from outside town. So while we were filming, we didn't necessarily mention that it was a gay film. They knew that we were doing a film. A couple people we did mention, but I kind of purposely kept it under wraps. And now, you know, flash forwarding to it coming out, and there's been people that have had an opportunity to view it. I mean, the town of Acuitzeramo is my town, and they've been 1,000% supportive. I get messages all the time about ranging from, you know, young people that said, my parents are from that town, and I haven't had the opportunity to have this conversation with them. And I think this town is going to be able to help them understand what this means. And I've had messages from older folks that have said, you know, nobody in my family talks about this. They all suspect that I'm gay and I'm an older man. And I think your film is going to be the tool that opens conversation within my family. So there's been countless messages, and Luis can attest to that because he's received them as well, about, you know, using this film as a tool. Because, you know, often in just in media in general, I feel like gay men, gay Latinx men, and gay men in general are sort of portrayed as cartoonish, you know, or sort of like, you know, Will from Will and Grace. That is what gay means. And other than that, there's no other dialogue in terms of humanity, in terms of these folks have the right to be happy. They have the right to be who they are and accept themselves without any shame. And I think that's when Luis and Sal come in, because that's exactly what we aim for, which was your previous question. Like, I wanted these characters to be three-dimensional. I wanted these characters to not just be a stereotype, but for audiences to fall in love with them and empathize with them, and use this film as an opportunity or a door to go into a conversation that's often hard to have. And it's unprecedented in terms of having these conversations in these towns or within our Latinx communities. How do you start this conversation? And I feel that, you know, from the messages that we've gotten from people in the town and not in the town, it's that they want to use this as to open up conversation and, you know, help use a film as a tool for conversation.
Yeah, and I can already tell by all the comments in the chat box that there's a lot of conversation, that this is inspiring. I see a note in the chat from Ana Taguma. I hope I pronounced your name right. She says that her mom is from Loreto, Zacatecas, Mexico, and still to this day does not talk about my uncle, whom is, I believe it's LGBTQ. For the actors, and this question is for Luis, what was your first reaction when you saw the script, and did it have any special significance, or was it relatable to your own experience, you know, as somebody that's a part of the queer community, as someone who may have a family member that may not have been able to live out and proud? Did the script have a special resonance with you?
Yeah, I mean, that absolutely. That's a multi-layered question for me. You know, again, I've been involved in the process since sort of the inception of it, and sort of Miguel would run different versions of the story for me. But I should say this. I'll answer the question in two parts. The first thing, this story is actually part of a bigger world that Miguel created. There's a previous movie called Broken Sunflower Hearts that takes place here in the States. My character is actually, that's sort of the genesis of Anthony in this previous film. And when he wanted to sort of create this story, he decided that, wait a second, why don't I just make this an extension of that world? So that for me, it's been sort of like a multi-year performance, in a sense. You know, the idea of the luxury of having been able to play Anthony in two different films in completely different situations was something that I don't know, as an actor, that's not something you get to do all the time. So I was definitely able to dig really deep. That's in, you know, one sort of level of answering your question. it was interesting, just the question that you just read right now about the audience member saying, you know, I'm actually from, my family is also from that part of Zacatecas. And yes, there is family members in my family. I can think of one uncle of mine who he was married to an aunt. They divorced. I think they must have been in the late 40s. This is many years ago. I'd say about 20 years ago. And no one really talked about what that was, but in our family, we knew what that was. We knew the reality of what had happened. And you know, and I think about this all the time, like that must happen in families. If it happened in this woman's family, if it's happened in my family, that means it happens in many families, you know, Latinx or otherwise, you know, Mexican or otherwise. And yeah, so it resonated in that regard as well, you know, that it is definitely a story that unfortunately repeats itself. You know, this notion of repression and the notion of a closet door being, you know, nailed shut is very painful for me to sort of reflect on. And you know, like Sal said today, watching the film, you know, and thank you to Sal's vulnerability and talent, you really are able to see a glimpse of what that pain is, you know, and continues to be. So yes, I mean, I think for sure, I think for me, the film and the story resonated very personally, but also, you know, very, very politically and very, very timely.
And speaking of politically and timely, we know that over the course of the past couple weeks here in the United States, we've had a number of victories that we could celebrate. The Supreme Court win on LGBTQ employment discrimination, also the DACA ruling, all very important rulings. They say the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And I felt like that bent a little bit more with those decisions. You know, we still have a long way to go. We know that social isolation is a major concern, especially in this COVID era. You know, in our remaining minutes together, can each of you share a little bit about what you think we can do to improve the lives of older LGBTQ folks in the Latinx community? What is it that we could be doing more? How could we be channeling our own talents and activism? Clearly, Miguel, Luis, and Salvador, you have channeled your activism in the form of this film by making the less visible, dare I say invisible, more visible. But what can we do in this moment to improve the lives of LGBTQ older adults that are Latinx? Miguel, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I mean, that's a really tough question, and I don't even know where to start, but I do know that, you know, I was also raised by and I'm going to speak from my personal experience. I was raised by my grandparents as well, in addition to my parents. So, you know, my grandparents and my parents were lucky because we come from a family where we actually take care of our elders and we don't send them away. So my mother took care of my parents until they passed. My sister and I and my brothers took care of my mother until she passed. And but I also know that it's not like that. And, you know, there's a lot of our elders that are in need of compassion and love, and especially at this time. So I feel that one of the things that I've been really amazed of, Nii-Quartelai, is the actual program that you guys have at AARP, which is the Senior Companion Program. And I think that's such a wonderful thing. I mean, when I was reading about it, it just kind of brought me to tears and for those of you that don't know what it is, it's basically, if you have time, you sign up to the Senior Companion Program and you visit seniors living at home alone or in certain situations, and you just become their friend. And I think at this point, you know, we are so caught up in our daily routines and our, you know, seeking our job security, job promotion, that we really tend to push our elders off to the side. And I feel like, you know, we need to start embracing them a little bit more and giving back and loving them, because it is that at that point in their lives that, they're in dire need for love. And that's also, we touch on it a little bit in this film, but I would say that, and, and in my case, I feel like the thing that I could do is make movies, and Luis and I are actually working on the feature of Acuitzeramo, which we want to get out there and get out to the world and hopefully make a change for compassion towards our community and our elders in through film.
Thank you, Miguel. Luis, same question.
I think
what would we be doing?
I would say, Nii-Quartelai, I would say, it's about, especially for our elders, queer or otherwise, I think so much, like Miguel said, when my mother was alive, who passed last year, I know that the biggest thing that I did for her was to be present in her life, and I think that us as individuals, that everyone on the panel, I know Sal, he's a dear friend of mine, and I know he went through something very difficult in his life with his mother-in-law, but all I can say is that being present in elders' lives, I think, is one of the single most important things that we can do as a younger generation, taking care of our elders, being present, conversing with them, taking them out. I think that's one of the biggest things. That it may sound mundane and very personal, but I think it's a very effective way of taking care of our elders, I would say.
Great, thank you, Luis. Salvador?
Well, it's a big conversation, I think. Culturally, it's different. In other cultures, elders are revered. I remember I had a conversation with this friend of mine, and he was saying when he retires, he's going to go to Thailand. He says, because in Thailand, the elders are revered. He says they're like gods, they're catered to, etc. And I think that, in our culture, we forget the value that our elders have. I mean, in other cultures, the Native American cultures, for instance, we would have, when there was a decision to be made in the village, you consulted the elders because they had the wisdom. They were no longer the warriors, but they were the ones who held onto the traditions and the wisdom. And I think that it is something that we are not tapping into, that resource, that it is a resource. I know as I get older, I think about that more, because I'm closer, right, to becoming that person that you no longer acknowledge. But I think that there's a lot for us to, there's a lot of value that we're missing. And these older people, they have stories, they have wisdom, they have experience that we can learn from. And I think that we need to think about this youth-oriented culture that we live in, and take a second look and pause and look inward and say, okay, maybe there is something here. What am I missing? I mean, those of us who had grandparents, we remember how golden those moments were that we spent with those grandparents, because they had so much to give us. And I think seniors and older people have so much to give to us. And we should embrace that.
Absolutely.
Amen.
And everything you all shared, I mean, that's exactly why AARP does the work that it does. It's why we work with organizations like Hispanic Heritage Foundation. It's why we believe in real possibilities, no matter what your age is. And so thank you for that. we're gonna take some questions from the folks that are logged on, because this is a charla, and so we want to talk. And so feel free to put your question in the question box or in the chat box, and we'll get through as many of those questions as we possibly can. I also want to sneak in one quick question. It's about films like Acuitzeramo. I first learned about this film at the Outfest Fusion Film Festival in Los Angeles. And for the folks on the chat that don't know, can you tell them a little bit about Outfest, Miguel? Tell them a little bit about Outfest and why Outfest is so important for filmmakers like you that are telling stories that are sort of off the beaten path and not quite mainstream yet.
Yeah, so Outfest is a film festival that takes place here in Los Angeles. It's been around, Luis, correct me if I'm wrong, for about 40 years, or how long is it?
Yeah, I think since since 1984 or something. Yeah, many years.
It was founded with the intent of having films and festivals as its own festival that weren't necessarily accepted to festivals at the time when it was founded. And it was basically championing LGBTQIA films that didn't have an opportunity to screen. And then now they have tremendous amount of programs that are catered to filmmakers. They have a screenwriters lab. They have, a youth program where, they get paired up and they go into this with a mentor, and you kind of teach them the ropes. And they have the Outfest, the main festival, and then the one you were talking about, Nii-Quartelai, which is Outfest Fusion, and that is specifically for filmmakers of color. So, and that's the one that we were accepted to. So it's sort of 2 festivals that they have every year, and it's Outfest Fusion for all people of color, and then Outfest Film Festival, which is just worldwide, open to everybody to screen. So it's a wonderful organization, and they have a lot of, resources for young filmmakers, LGBTQ filmmakers, people that want to, learn to make films, and already established filmmakers in terms of a screenwriting lab that they have. And it's just a wonderful organization to be part of.
Thank you for sharing that, Miguel, and a big thank you to our friends over at Outfest Film Festival, also another partner of AARP. That's great. And so I'm going to get through as many questions as time allows in the chat. I see that Fernando Zeldon, I hope I pronounced that right. I'm still working on my Spanish. He says that this COVID is going to switch mindsets when it comes to the elderly. I just want to build off of that. Has living in this COVID-19 era, has it made you think about the characters in this film or some of the themes in this film a little bit differently than you did pre-COVID, Luis?
Yeah, I guess, everything now coming through my mind, and Miguel and I are also right now steeped in another writing venture with another feature film. So I think everything even on a subconscious level is being sort of asked to be reassessed and reconsidered as we're going through this hopefully once in a lifetime occurrence, but yeah, I think even now, amongst content creators, there has been a push, and there has been discussions about, what our story's going to look like, how our story's going to be affected now with this reality in terms of production and the actual creation of these stories. But yeah, I think so. I think everything sort of now under the guise and under this filter of COVID-19. But, again, I think the important thing to remember is that we have to continue to create. We have to continue to write. We have to continue to tell the stories of Salvador and sort of build up from that. I think this is it's a wonderful sort of base to build up from, and not just us, that, you know, hopefully it'd be wonderful to see more stories about sort of the fringe characters, people within, you know, LGBTQIA communities or other communities. You know, I think there's many stories to still be told, you know.
What was the largest hurdle filming this project across the border, and also, you know, back here in the States? You basically filmed it on both sides of the border. Were there any unique hurdles that you had to overcome?
This specific Acuitzeramo was only filmed in Mexico, and I mean, I think the biggest hurdle or the biggest kind of danger that we stepped into was the town of Acuitzeramo is, you know, you get to the Guadalajara airport and it's about 3 hours away. It's kind of in the middle of you know, it's a small town. And the camera equipment came from Mexico City, which was, I don't know, they came in a van, and it took them about 7 hours, 8 hours to get there. And that's what we had. Filming here in the US, if something breaks down, you could rush to the camera place, and, you know, you are delayed an hour and a half, which is sort of like, you know, kind of like really bad when you delay an hour and a half, because then you have to play catch up. I didn't even want to think about it, but if something were to go wrong in this town, we only had 3 days to film. The actors had round trip tickets. After the last day, they were coming back the following day. So if anything would have gone wrong, it would have taken 14 hours to get a replacement. So I think the biggest hurdle of filming on a budget and in a small rural town is that if something goes wrong, it could be catastrophic for the film, and to the point where it probably won't even be finished. You'd have to make other arrangements. So yeah, that I would say was the scariest and the most challenging thing while filming.
I'm sure Miguel knows the answer to this question, but I want to ask Luis. This question comes from JD Brown. Could you speak to your choice? Can you speak to why Luis's character didn't introduce his partner or his husband to Salvador at the end of the short? We were waiting for them to go back inside and say, "You're not alone."
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
We're all one happy family.
You know, it's really interesting. I mean, that's. I mean, that I have my own interpretations in regards to why that happened, but really, I think it's Miguel's sort of this question definitely falls, I think, in the writer and director of the project.
So basically,
Miguel, the people want to know. The people want to know.
So initially, you mentioned it, you touched on it before, that he comes across as homophobic, you know, because he's angry. He's like, you know, he's gay. So you feel that the character that Luis plays, Anthony, is, you know, just not accepting of his father's ways, and he comes here for the funeral, and he's, you know, sort of angry. So there was a balance there to play with the character that I think Luis did an amazing job. And what was happening is that I feel that his boyfriend wanted him to have his own alone time and kind of really try to relive the missing years through his partner. And I think it would have changed the dynamic on, you know, having another body there. And two, I wanted it to be a reveal, because I feel like on top of everything that's happened in the film, when you find out that Anthony is gay, you realize that they were both gay and they didn't tell each other. So then the question comes in terms of, had Anthony come out to his father, would he had left him? Had Anthony come out to his father, he probably wouldn't have left. So it's kind of dealing with all the shame that comes with even just telling somebody who you are, and the consequences of that shame, the consequences of not being who you are. In the case of Anthony and Roberto, his father who passed, you lost an entire life there, an entire connection, because of all the weight that they had on them of feeling ashamed. This is not who you're supposed to be. So they just, you know, that life was broken. So I felt it was important for the audience also to experience that at the very end, a sort of reversal of like, oh my God, he was gay too. And they had this, they lost this life together because of all the shame that comes with accepting who you are. And because, you know, Anthony didn't accept who he was, he pretty much lost his father.
Mm-hmm. What was the meaning of the dancers? I feel this question has come up numerous times in the chat box. What was the meaning of the dancers? And were they performing the Danza de los Viejitos? I hope I got that
Viejitos.
right.
Yeah.
Viejitos.
Yes, it was La Danza de los Viejitos, and that dance is specifically from the state of Michoacan. And the way that it's performed currently is exactly how we saw it in the film. These men that have like a sort of like an elder face, and you know they have like a bordón,
Cane.
bordón Luis, a
Cane.
cane. They have a cane, and that's how the dance is performed. And it's usually performed by younger folks. But the history of that comes like way back from the culture of the Purepecha, where only older wise men, like Sal was saying, were allowed to perform this dance.
The shamans of the community.
The shamans of the community were allowed to perform this dance. And what they were is whenever somebody passed, they were the ones that would take the spirit from the physical world through that dance into the spiritual world. So in the film, they are taking Roberto, Anthony's father, into the spiritual world, but he doesn't leave until he knows that Anthony and Salvador are okay and they come together in a loving way. That's when you see him start leaving, that the shamans actually help him pretty much leave the physical earth into the spiritual world. So that was the meaning of these dancers to aid Roberto in leaving the physical world.
J. Ben Castro.
More clear in the future.
Oh, go ahead, Salvador.
I said it'll be more clear in the future.
Yeah, right.
In
exactly.
the future, yes.
We're here for it. We're here for it. There's a question in the chat box from Jabin Castro, who said, how can we help in sharing this movie with our family, not only here in the U.S., but back in our home countries, with the understanding that, you know, we need to educate our communities, and by sharing these stories, by sharing these characters, you know, that's a part of how we build community and build a more accepting climate. And so how can folks help share this movie far and wide?
Absolutely.
So right now we're going through this interesting transition in terms of doing a festival year, but most of the festivals that will be coming up are going to be online festivals that we do. After the end of this year, the film will be available in one way or form, I would say by next year, the beginning of next year. And we do have a website so they could sign up, and once it's available, we'll be letting people know, and it's Acuitzeramofilm.com. And I think there we also, we post different things, and once it's available, yes, I would love it to distribute it to all parts of the world, and anybody that needs, could benefit from it in terms of opening up dialogue with family or friends.
And are there any big film festivals that folks might see this film at?
Right now, we are on hold for a few, and we will be announcing on the page. We don't have any festivals at the moment. We are on hold, but they've asked not to say anything until they do their own press release. But we do post, there's like links to follow us, and we're really good about posting on Instagram and kind of keeping people updated, and it's Acuitzeramo Film. So we will have quite a handful of festivals coming up, and it would be wonderful if people could actually join and see it as well.
So basically all the folks here can keep up with all of the fanfare around this really extraordinary film by going to Acuitzeramo Film, at Acuitzeramo Film on Instagram. It looks like you can also go to Acuitzeramofilm.com and subscribe to just sort of stay in the loop on all things Acuitzeramo Film. We have a question in the chat from Roman Encinas. I hope I got that right. Encinas, there we go.
There it goes.
This is what happens when you get too fancy. Encinas, right? Was there anything in particular, Sal, that you did to prepare for the role? Any specific technique, and how did you assess and work the character analysis? Inquiring minds want to know.
I'm an actor, so the idea is to bring as much authenticity and and uh, and humanity to the character that you're portraying. So when I approach a role, you read the script and it's there, and in this case, Miguel wrote this wonderful character that was all on the page. So all we had to do was extract it from the script and bring it to life. I didn't have to do any somersaults or anything like that. It was pretty much all there, which makes it easy. And working with Luis, rehearsing, we discover the moments and the scene, what we're trying to accomplish, the connection, just that process. There's nothing really, how should I say, magical, although we try to bring the magic to the scene and to the film, obviously,
right.
Guided by me.
Thank you for that, Sal. And I want to give each of you to share just sort of quickly a final thought before we throw it back to Antonio to close us out for the afternoon. Sal, we'll start with you. Final thought?
Oh, just that, you had mentioned earlier about what were some of the challenges or hardships that when we were in Mexico about filming. Well, my biggest one was that because it's a smaller town, you had roosters that would wake you up at 5:30 in the morning. Right by my window. But what was wonderful was that, it was such because we were all there in one location, was really a family atmosphere. And we're literally, Miguel's family was part of they cooked for us, we all ate together. And that was just really special to be in that town and to spend this. It was such a small amount of time, but we just bonded and it was we were all in this together, to tell this story. Yeah. And I think that was really, really special. And, in 3 days, it was remarkable. Yeah. So when people get together for something good that they believe in, great things can happen. And in this case, we have this magical little movie that we were able to create.
That's amazing. Right. This magical little movie that is creating quite a bit of buzz. I see Richard Arnowitz put in the chat that this film would be a great fit in the upcoming Miami-Fort Lauderdale Outshine Festival. And so I'm sure you all will be able to connect afterwards if you're not already planning to be there. But Luis, final thoughts about
of course. Well,
even your hopes for what this film might.
I just want to thank the Hispanic Heritage Foundation and AARP, yourself, and everyone that made this possible, creating space and time to really help this story get out there. And as we can see, and this is something that we're realizing now that this little movie, this little magical piece that we have actually has legs, and that I think the further and wider that is seen, I think that could only help the discussion and sort of bring empathy and understanding to the Salvadors in the world. Men, women, trans. We have a long way to go, and it's beautiful to have the Hispanic Heritage Foundation and AARP come together in this way and provide a stage for this story to be told. So we're all very grateful. I'm grateful. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Miguel, so my friend, final thoughts.
I'm gonna piggyback on what Luis is saying, and I'm just gonna, I'm a content creator, I'm a director, and I create stuff, and it brings me so much passion to do stories like this, like Acuitzeramo. And I also understand that, I could create as much as I want, but then I need a platform. And I really, really want to thank AARP and the Hispanic Heritage Foundation for making this charla, this LOFT Charla, available to us and sharing this with a massive audience, because, you know, like I said, we are creators, and these platforms are so necessary to reach our communities, to reach everybody. And I'm very, very grateful that this exists, and I'm very grateful that our film got chosen to play today and be part of a charla and a conversation, which are, you know, we're talking about how do we make a change in this, and elders who are gay, and this is how it begins, and we are doing that just now. And thank you guys for giving us the opportunity. And, you know, Luis and I are also looking forward to working on the feature of Acuitzeramo. So half of the work is already done because it's already cast. We have the wonderful actors. So now it's just getting the film done and, you know, reaching a wider audience with it. And thank you everybody who tuned in and watched the film. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Miguel, I think you're breaking news here. So are you saying that there's going to be a feature length Acuitzeramo?
Yes,
Did
we're
I
working.
hear that correctly?
We're working on the script right now, and we hope to shoot in the same town, and it's the same characters, and it will be, you know, Luis and Sal playing the same characters, and it would be a feature length. That is the goal, and hopefully,
Wow.
yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, you know, it has been a privilege to be a part of this charla. I can't thank each of you enough. Big thank you to Miguel Angel Caballero, Luis Aldana, and Salvador Lopez. Also, a big thank you to the Hispanic Heritage Foundation team. Thank you to Tony. Thank you to Brenda and Roberto, and of course, our team over at República Havas, and of course, my colleagues at AARP, Yvette Pena, Veronica Segovia Bedon, and Jessica. Thank you to everybody. I mean, you know, we all just fell in love with the film, and I think we all just wanted to do our part to make sure that that our heritage, the heritage of all of our communities, particularly the Latino community, that our heritage could be front and center
Absolutely.
during Pride Month and beyond. And because of all of you, we were able to do that. So thanks to everybody that logged on to the charla. I'm going to throw it back to Brenda to close us out, but I want to encourage everybody to check out aarpcommunityconnections.org. You heard the cast mention AARP's Friendly Voice program, and there's an opportunity there to volunteer and be a friendly voice to folks that may be a little socially isolated these days.
Mm-hmm.
And so visit us there. But, you know, stay tuned to more good stuff coming from Hispanic Heritage Foundation. This charla was amazing. I'm a 4-star when it comes to charlas. This is my 4th charla. Tony, you know, I don't know who has me beat, but, you know, let's keep it going. Brenda, back to you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Nii-Quartelai.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nii-Quartelai, Luis, Miguel Angel, Sal. This was absolutely amazing. Definitely enjoyed it. I'm seeing the chat box, and everyone absolutely loved it. We are so happy and honored to have had the ability to do this filming with you all and work together with AARP. As I said, please follow Acuitzeramo. We're super excited for it and what's coming up with the film. Please stay tuned. For attendees, please stay tuned. We have more exciting charlas with AARP. So keep a lookout in your inbox for our future charlas. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you all next week.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
See you guys.